Welcome to the Assertive Podcast. I'm Erica,
I'm Jess.
and we are licensed professional counselors in Texas, reviewing Am I the Asshole Reddit threads to help you learn skills for communication, healthy boundary setting, and assertive interpersonal functioning. Today, we are continuing our talk on anger. Tuesday, we dropped an episode. We talked about the overview of anger, looked at too little, too much. Just give us a quick recap.
Ooh, I've been killing on these recaps, just recapping like crazy. So every emotion has a function. Emotions are neither good nor bad. They are signals. Our job with healthy coping is to learn what they are telling us. The emotion of anger is telling us that we need to have a voice. So this could look like communicating either usually a boundary or talking about another emotion. So it gives us a voice. So too much anger, our voice is too big. That's rage and that's aggression. Not enough anger and our voice is too little, that looks like being passive. Lots of times it's stewing resentment or scorekeeping underneath it. That's the gist of it.
That's the gist of it,
That's
yeah.
the gist of it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We reviewed anger with a post titled, Am I the Asshole for Screaming at My Friend Out of Frustration Because She Always Uses Me? Jess is going to give us a quick reread of this, and then we're going to jump into coping and regulation.
Okay, the author is a 14-year-old girl, and her friend is also a 14-year-old girl. Author writes, I screamed at my friend D out of frustration yesterday. My friend's a pretty toxic person. When we are at school, she doesn't talk to me. She usually just straight up ignores me or just walks away to talk with her friend group. She only talks to me when she needs help understanding something about the lesson material, to copy my homework, or ask for a book. I don't mind. It's usually pretty easy for me to help my friends with school. She will often say, I forgot my book, I didn't know we had class today, or just won't bring it on purpose because her back hurts and she didn't want to carry more books. She's an athlete, and it's understandable because she is training and usually competes in competition for prizes. But she always complains about how hard her training is and that she just wants to leave practice but never does. So we had our first lesson yesterday, but no one brought anything for the lesson. No pens, no pencils, literally nothing. I was the only one with a pencil case in the whole class, so everyone started asking me for pencils to do some work. I just got so annoyed because why do I need to give them everything, and why can't they even say a simple thanks? So when we got back from class, I just got so frustrated and fed up with everything. I walked up to her and just started screaming at her about how immature she is and how I can't understand how she is still alive when she can't even bring a pencil to the lesson. I shouted how she just uses me for homework and just free stuff. So after I just screamed at her and let out all my frustration, I went to my best friend, let's call her Kay, to just calm down and prepare for the next lesson. As I was trying to calm down, something else happened that made me so mad at Dee, I just wanted to scream at her again. One of our friends from our friend groups came up to Dee to ask about why I just shouted at her. And guess what Dee said? She, meaning the author, is just mad at me, Dee, because I asked for a pencil. Even though I told her it's about how she uses me for everything when I was just screaming at her. At that exact moment, I was so angry and sad at the same time, I just wanted to cry. A couple minutes later, my eyelid starts twitching. It was just awful. I couldn't concentrate and it was so uncomfortable. Later that day, I asked my mom about my eye, and it's probably because of stress, but I'm not sure. I kind of feel like the problem here. What should I do in this kind of situation? She is a decent friend and the only one who lives close by me. Am I the asshole? And if I am, what should I do to save our friendship?
Our first episode on anger, we did indicate that the author is the asshole.
Mm-hmm.
She was not effectively setting boundaries. She was enabling this behavior. She was allowing herself to be treated in this passive way, and basically created the environment for being taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
And then became the exploding doormat, exploded on her friend versus just moving into assertiveness. So when we are in one of our imbalanced state of either passivity or aggressiveness, how do we regulate to assertiveness? How do you help your clients do that?
Oh, I'll give different skills depending on kind of how they swing, but I guess kind of the basic, education I give about it is for these really high energy emotions, we get very deep into our primal brain. And so this is where a lot of like the rigid thinking comes from. This is the really high physiological responses. So first thing we have to do is bring ourselves back into kind of these outer, more less ancient parts of ourselves. So we need to be able to re-engage our reason, our impulse control, our cost benefit analysis functions, all these things. So different clients will need kind of different things to get them out of that space. So basically for the ragers and the aggressive clients, I first say, like, basically we have to calm your body. We can give a high level overview and go into more depth into these skills, but that's going to look like breathing strategies. That might look like even some distraction techniques to help the adrenaline come down. That might look like being physically calm or doing something that feels peaceful. Maybe communicating about it and venting to somebody. For a more passive client who's going to do more internalizing, I might have them go do a journal to figure out what they want to talk about. I might have them do kind of a replay scenario of what it's going to be like to set that boundary and how uncomfortable that's going to be. That's like role play that practice. And then for everybody, I think a timeout, if this is happening within a conflict, there's going to be other de-escalation techniques that people need to do to be able to continue that conversation. And if somebody's out on their own, just being angry by themselves, obviously we don't need to really go with some of the other things. I think the most basic, my favorite just beginner anger management tool is called the 3 Bs, which is easy to remember. It's just breathe, back up, and be quiet. Because if you do the 3 things, you're probably not going to fight anybody, which that's kind of the ultimate risk of anger is like just raw aggression and rage, right? So when I was working with my domestic violence clients, if you're being quiet and you're not in space with somebody, the cops will probably not get involved. So that's the starting point. We're just going to take some calm breaths. And I think kind of having skills feel simple like that can help, because the anger is going to hijack our brain, and we need really simple skills to be able to re-engage that reason. So there's a saying in 12 step called "Keep it simple, stupid." KISS, KISS. So it's just when you're first starting, just have kind of your little basic skills, or maybe even some mantras that can help you remind you of how to de-escalate. That was a monologue of things. We can go into more depth. Some of the skills I like high level introduced. What, we can trim that down. Good Lord. What was your, how do you talk about it?
I talk about it in a very similar manner. I usually do psychoeducation on those primitive states, and I do a lot of breathing and grounding work to help de-escalate people who have veered into aggressiveness. With my passive folks, I kind of hype them up a little bit, become kind of a hype man.
Yeah.
And I'm almost like, I can't believe they did this.
You said to like us, they're probably like, why are they trying to make me mad? I'll do the same thing. Like, because
I'm trying to like initiate, the energy, because with passivity, they've learned to really calm and suppress the natural energy that comes with anger that prompts us into action. And so I try and activate some of this energy, and then it's like, there we go. Now we're angry.
Yep.
Let's talk about this. What does this feel like? What is the danger in feeling this? Why does this seem like something we need to get rid of so quickly and be really passive? So naturally, my clientele, just with my specialization, they tend to be more passive. So I do more hyping than I'm having to de-escalate.
Yeah. And I know, like, talk about the caseload, so yours is a lot of passive people. I know you like a lot of like kind of people pleasing and like codependent kinds of things. I think I might actually have more, I think I have more passive people. I got some excitable characters on my caseload right now too. I think it can be hard for passive folks, especially if in session I am kind of playing devil's advocate and almost trying to amp them up, which feels weird in therapy. Some clients are really, if they feel like it's like, why are you trying to make me mad? Like, this is an uncomfortable emotion. I don't want to feel this. But again, it's neither bad nor good. It's just a sign. So that's always kind of my, I'm teaching clients about anger. I'm always like, what do you need to communicate? What do you need to tell somebody? That's like always where I bring it back to.
Yep.
Yeah. I was kind of wanting to talk about how to kind of regulate ourselves as individuals and then how to de-escalate if anger is taking up too much space in a conflict.
Yes.
Okay, how about you give me your top 3 skills that you use with your passive people, and I'll give you my top 3 coping skills that I use with my aggressive people.
Yes. We do a lot of boundary setting. We do a lot of communication skills. So we have a season 1 episode on I statements. We have a season 1 episode on what is a boundary, and we go really in depth into how do you set a boundary and what is that framework. If you guys want a dedicated episode, there's some season 1 options there for you guys. But it's really, what is the boundary? What's causing the emotion? We do a lot of like what's stopping us from speaking up. In our planning session, we talked a little bit about being raised in this era of like kids should be seen, not heard.
Yeah.
And it maybe not being safe to be angry out loud. And so we had to be angry very quietly inside of our body. And we had to redirect that energy. So we talk about where's this thought process and core beliefs with anger stemming from. So we throw in some CBT work with core beliefs and reframing and challenging those. So usually we start with anger, but then we end up usually in fear for my caseload.
Yeah.
Is where we end up doing more work.
Hurt. I feel like hurt is usually what's like, I think the person hurt your feelings. I think you feel kind of sad.
Yeah. I would agree with that. So we would go fear or pain or probably 2. Occasionally we'll get some like guilt, shame of like the embarrassment, which is kind of this nuance emotion of we're feeling a little bit guilty, we're feeling a little bit of ashamed.
Yeah.
So we typically start out in anger because there is something we do need to speak up about.
Okay. You'd go in, so for a passive person, you would basically then figure out what about this like bothered you. And then you'd have them go in there of like boundary setting in general, and then helping them kind of deal with the distress of anger and then seeing what else is under there so that they can have a space to talk about other emotions that are coming up.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Because we could do all of this work, but there's still maybe some fear or safety mechanism going on to where it feels unsafe to do any of that work. None of that work is ever going to get put into practice.
Right.
Whether they're real or they're just perceived or they're carried into adulthood from childhood, we deal with that and then we can go back and say, let's do this. Or we deal with something else like, what if they stop being your friend? So like in this post, what if she stopped being your friend? Would that be so bad?
Like playing the tape through kind of?
Yeah, like what would that mean? What would that look like? What would that say about you? What do you think people would think about you? Do their opinions matter? Does this change who you are at your core? And so then we go into kind of belief challenging with that.
Yeah. Some of the core, maybe around like people pleasing or what they're what they're getting from the relationship.
Yep. The core beliefs that are really powering the passivity.
Yeah, and anger, now we're talking about it, I'm like such a social emotion, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Which I don't think we would really think about it in that way, but it really is. It's a driver of communication a lot of the times.
Yep. I was just trying to think, how often do we get mad at ourselves in comparison to other people? And I don't know if I necessarily get angry. I maybe feel disappointed, or I feel let down, or I feel frustrated with myself. But rarely am I just like purely angry. And again, I'm an internalizer, so this may be very different for an externalizer. I think a lot of what maybe should be anger is diverted and converted to shame. And then I get into like the shoulda, woulda, coulda-ing.
Oh, I should have been angry. Yeah.
Or like, I should have spoken up. Like, that was a good time for me to say this. That's like the shower arguments where you like replay the argument in the shower with all the things you could have said and you have like the best comebacks.
Oh, I do that all the time. Like, I'm practicing for next time. I'm going to come ready for next time.
So, but yeah, you're right. It is more social. We tend to get angry at other people, I think, versus angry with ourselves.
For sure. I'm trying to think about, I've never felt rage towards myself.
I
don't think so. I think I've been like, duh, that was annoying. I think I've been like mildly like annoyed with myself. Yeah, if I get rage, it's at a person or just an inanimate concept like traffic. Like I drop something. It's like it's not like the inconvenience of it or something. It's not. Yeah, we all have our own triggers too. Huh? Yeah. And even, when a person first comes to therapy, a lot of it is really initial, just noticing triggers so that we can like figure out this cause and effect cascade that's happening. And so that's generally, especially with a rager, that's kind of the first things we do of like, what sets you off? Like, what are your buttons? Because we have to come prepared that like you're probably going to get pretty mad if this happens. So you need to have these skills on deck before you end up in like a loaded situation. And a lot of it's practicing before like you need to.
Mm-hmm.
The reptilian brain goes nuts. I think for the the clients that I have that are ragers and the aggressive people, it's really just focusing on calming the body. So again, the 3 Bs, I think that's an initial one. Breathe, back up, be quiet. Each client will kind of make that their own way. I'm like, does that look like 3 deep breaths? Do you want to do some square breathing? Is that laying on the ground with your hands on your belly? So you can kind of describe your own breathing skills that you wanted to use. Back up is basically saying some kind of timeout. So that could either be in the height of conflict, or it's just kind of committing to like controlling impulsivity on reactions, on verbal reactions. So whatever the client needs to do, then it's like they need to leave the space and go cool off. They need to go take a shower. They need to let their partner know they're pausing the dialogue. And so just by backing up and being quiet, it's basically damage control of, okay, we're not going to do anything to inflict harm while I regulate. So it's taking that space. Depending on how open somebody is to de-escalation, I generally think that energy has to get dissipated somehow before we can use some of the more calming skills. So lots of times I think this is where venting can be helpful. I think when we're really mad, having somebody just kind of listen to our story can sometimes someone says something like, oh, I feel so much better getting it out. I guess it wasn't that big of a deal. And lots of times they'll kind of naturally move towards resolution once they can just feel heard. So lots of times when I'm working with a really high anger client, we'll have people, I'm like, who is somebody who you can call and we'll just listen and let you have your 20 minutes to tell your story. And kind of identifying those people beforehand. And then also sometimes it's just exercise or just having some kind of like explosive activity. You know, go out and do 20 jumping jacks. Why don't you go for a run? Go ahead and take a time out and hit the gym. Because I think once we're able to de-escalate that physical response, that feedback loop for that anger de-escalation kind of dissipates as well. So we might still have cognitive anger responses, but we don't have the physical agitation like we would if we were to keep all that energy inside. So it's mostly just kind of energy management. And then it'd be kind of the same skills as the passive person. Okay, what are boundaries? What are needs being met? What kept us from asking for this thing? That's my general thoughts there.
Yeah.
Probably pretty similar.
One thing I'll say, when you're aggressive leaning and we're looking for a venting person, we do not want the hype man.
Oh yeah, no.
That's not going to work out well for you.
One time, I wouldn't normally do this with a client. I had a client who was like, maybe talking about her boss. I don't know, somebody, a boss, some woman friend, and she was talking about it for a while, and I was like, oh, what a bitch! I hate her. And the client started laughing hysterically, and then she defended the person, being like, "Well, she's not that bad." And I was like, "Okay," I said, "Well, I got your back." And I kind of like joked about it. It just caught her off guard, but just me being like really extreme. She said, "Well, actually, it was a joke, you know."
Yeah.
And that's there's a thought skill, a thought reframing called exaggerating the thought.
Yes.
So lots of times with anxiety, maybe somebody's worried about something. They're, oh my gosh, what if I get fired? So I'm like, all right, go in on it. What's worth? Oh my God, I'm going to get fired, and then I'm going to be homeless, and then I'm probably going to get tuberculosis. I'm going to die. My family's going to be desolate, and then we'll all the family refraction. I'm like, whoa, you like really kind of lean into it. Sometimes having your venting partner kind of exaggerate, it kind of can highlight a little bit of maybe being a little bit dramatic. Yeah. And we want somebody who has our side, but isn't amplifying us.
Yeah.
So we want somebody who's able to like tolerate our anger, but then can help us ask. This person is asking you questions. This person is reflecting. This person is not giving their opinion. Those people are hard to find. So you don't have somebody like that. A therapist can do that for you. Save your stories for therapy. What do you... And some people don't like venting because they say something like, well, I don't want to be negative, or I don't want to just bring people down. How do you talk about the difference between like venting and processing?
Yes. Venting, we're moving, but we're not really getting anywhere. And processing is we're moving and we're getting somewhere. So you end up somewhere different than where you started, whereas venting, you usually end up in the same place.
And that's what I think it looks like when anger starts to de-escalate, is that there's kind of a softening of rigidity. So we gain some mental flexibility where we can start, what are other ways that this might explain the situation? What are ways where I might need to apologize? What, is it really every time? And check in on that. But I think when we're stuck in that really reptilian, rigid brain, it could be hard to think differently.
Yeah. And we noted this in the previous episode, but with her saying like everybody in the class didn't bring a pencil. And I challenged that. Was it really everybody? Was it majority of people? But some people did.
It feels like everybody.
Yeah.
Right. But that's not probably aligned with reality.
Mm-hmm. So kind of throwing in some fact checking is what that skill is called. It felt like everybody was that the fact though.
Yeah.
If we wrote everybody's name in that classroom on a piece of paper, every single one of these people asked you for a pencil? Well, no. Okay. Let's put this into perspective. How many of these people? 10 out of 17. Okay. So that's the majority of the folks.
A lot of people
did. Or over half at that point. So you're right. I bet that felt pretty frustrating, but then telling yourself everybody did it is also like adding a level of amplitude to it that it doesn't deserve. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be accurate. I'm also kind of tickled. I'm glad we're still using pencils. I assume everyone just uses Chromebooks now. I'm also a little delighted to hear that we have pencil cases and old school shit like that going on.
That does sound really old school, like the pencil case.
A pencil case? What year is it? This is a 14-year-old person, so I'm like, okay, it's high school's. Yeah, that's good to know. All right. Yeah, one thing I wanted to talk about, really, it's a common situation where an aggressive communicator is paired, and usually romantically paired, with a passive communicator, and a lot of times the challenges can come from the aggressor not knowing how to regulate and bring down the energy level, and the passive person just kind of, their focus is to de-escalate the aggressor, but then the conflict never actually gets resolved because we're distracted by the anger. So I want to talk, a little bit about how to de-escalate somebody else. So the point of anger is to give you a voice. And so when somebody is mad, what they're needing is to be understood. They're needing to know that you're hearing them. And so once they know that you're listening to them, they don't need to demonstrate anger anymore. That emotion has been resolved, and now they can just talk to you because they have a platform for it. So one of kind of it's kind of a validation and reflection, kind of 101. So if you're a passive person and your partner, you guys get into a conflict and they're really amped up and they're agitated and you guys are fighting, you could say something really simple of like, I can tell that you're mad. Like, you seem mad. You're putting a word. You seem angry. You seem really pissed off. I can tell you're furious. You're just reflecting a feeling word, and you're letting them know that you are recognizing that they are experiencing that. Then you can let them know, I want to hear what you're saying, but I'm feeling distracted by how intense this is. So that's letting them know, I hear your anger, that has a platform, that you don't need to continue behaving in an angry way, but you still have a space to talk. So I can tell that you're mad. I want to hear what you're saying, but I'm distracted by how intense this is. Do you mind coming over here and sitting down so that I'm able to relax and hear you better? So it's reflecting your response of the anger to them. So, and that also letting them know if they continue to yell, it's not going to work. They're not going to be a better listener because they're screaming at you. And it lets them kind of de-escalate a bit. So if you find yourself, just reiterate, hey, you look really mad. I can tell that you're mad. I want to listen to you, but I'm feeling intimidated or whatever, distracted by how upset you are. Do you mind coming over here and sitting down with me so that I'm better able to understand what you're saying when we're both a little more calm? If that person is totally rejecting the de-escalation, they need to obviously get some skill sets for internal regulation, but that can be a good way of kind of helping kind of show them that they can relax a little bit.
Yeah. Sometimes there's a drawback to this where assigning an emotion to somebody depending on their state and their own internal processes, can backfire.
Yeah. Don't tell me I'm mad. I'm not mad.
Yes. Or somebody who's maybe been accused of being really angry, or people are suggesting go to anger management type, they may be hypersensitive to somebody labeling them in the anger range of the emotion wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can note the behavior and then ask what's wrong, or ask them, I'm curious what you're feeling. I can see your brow furrowed and the veins popping in your forehead and your fists are clenched. It seems like something's bothering you. Would you like to talk about it?
Mm-hmm.
So for some people, it is going to be safe to just go ahead and throw out an emotion. 9 times out of 10, they will correct us if we get it wrong. But there is going to be that 1 out of 10 who's hypersensitive to being labeled.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just move into open dialogue of, tell me what you're feeling or what's happening for you.
Yeah, I like that. So don't, because that person might, so you're kind of assuming or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Like
And
that.
again, like when we did the episode on validation, that's the framework. I understand why you're insert the emotion that you're perceiving from their behavior or even from the way they're speaking.
Mm-hmm.
But again, 9 times out of 10, they're going to correct you every once in a while.
And even if you
kind of avoid that.
Yeah. And I think even if you guess wrong, people are pleased that you're trying to, it shows an attempt to understand,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and even if somebody is resistant to being labeled, it's still helpful for them to know when you behave this way, other people are going to assume you feel this way. So if you want to align what you're needing with how you're behaving, you need to check your nonverbals, because if you're actually feeling calm but you're screaming, people aren't really going to believe you. You know, also, you know, it depends on what point in anger, right? If somebody's punching holes in the wall saying, hey, do you want to come talk about stuff? They're not going to be able to talk to you about something calmly then.
Right.
You know, that's obviously a safety thing then. So, you know, you need to know your partner, or this could also just be in a family of origin sometimes too. So you need to know your people. But you got to start practicing that stuff too. So you're going to make mistakes and you're going to guess wrong and you're going to maybe accidentally antagonize them or poke a bear at times. You're not meaning to, but that's part of the learning curve of it.
Yep. And that's something you can always review in hindsight. We call it like conflict autopsy.
Yeah.
You can go back and have that discussion. But like facial expressions are universal. Like they've done studies on this. It doesn't really matter what language you speak. A smile presents as happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Anger has its own facial expressions. Fear has its own facial expressions. Embarrassment or shame.
So cool.
So if they're feeling one emotion, but the behavioral cues and the facial expressions are letting the people in their lives think another emotion is happening, that's problematic for them.
Yeah, I could tell at a partner, I could tell when he was mad because he would change how he blinked. I was like, oh, this motherfucker mad. He's blinking a little too fast. Yeah. You know, again, that's one of the keystones of passive aggressive communicators. We call that affect incongruence. They're the ones who will smile when they're furious or tell you everything's fine when they're raging. And that's really confusing to interact with somebody like that.
Absolutely.
And especially patterns take time to change. So if a rager is in a spot where they are learning how to better regulate and you guys are having better patterns of communication, this isn't that fair fighting of this is where timeouts are helpful, where both parties just need to take some space to be able to calm down. If both parties get better at that, lots of times it can happen real time. We don't need to take these big pauses in a conflict. But that could also be in terms of a conflict de-escalation of having like a timeout plan in place beforehand.
We talk a little bit more about timeouts, and I want to say it's fair fighting.
Yep.
So if you guys are looking for kind of a how-to, go check that episode out.
And then again, when you and I were prepping, we were both talking about kind of grounding techniques.
Yes.
Which when we say grounding, what we're saying is basically we're getting you into a space where you are here in the present and now. Your mind is not thinking about anything else other than where your body is in space. And this could be helpful for all kinds of emotions.
Yeah.
Do you want to go over some of the kind of most common grounding tools you use?
Yes. So first, when I talk about grounding, I use the imagery of an elevator. So often when we're escalated, we're in the top floor, we're in the penthouse, we're at the rooftop bar, right? Nothing good is happening up there.
Or maybe, I mean, now I'm curious, the penthouse, God.
Right. But there is no logic.
Logic, right.
Up in the penthouse or on the rooftop. Logic is living down on the ground floor. So you can't problem solve. You probably can't effectively communicate what your needs are or what you're feeling when you are in this elevated state. So when we say grounding, that's kind of a good illustration, and folks can usually resonate with that and say, oh, okay, I get it. I need to like come back down to the lobby.
Yeah.
Grounding skills I use, we have mental grounding, which a lot of times is just kind of mentally noticing your surroundings. So this could be just looking around the room and naming the objects you see. So for me, I have a window, I have a heater, I have a fan, I have my diffuser, I have some ibuprofen, I have a scratch map for my travels, I have my closet doors, I have a picture, I have a bag, I have a lamp, I have my desk, I have a book, I have my phone, I have my chapstick, there's some fingernail polish, a bunch of random shit on my desk, guys.
I'm like, I have a plant, and then there's a plant, and there's a plant.
So that's one type of mental grounding. You can just name all of the colors in the room. That's another type of mental grounding. One of my favorite ones to do with clients is what I call ABC grounding. So you look around the room and you find something for each letter of the alphabet. And I tell my clients, don't recreate the wheel with this. Don't overthink it. So I might use my phone, C for cell phone, P for phone, I for iPhone, A for Apple.
Oh.
M for mobile phone.
Okay. You're like, there's an asshole.
So don't overthink it. But I did have one client who got so stuck on the letter A. She's like, it did work because I was so hyper focused on finding something with the letter A, emotions and my anger about the other thing.
Get distracted.
Diffused. Yeah, I was so distracted on trying to find something that started with the letter A.
Yeah. And I like that you do the ABC with things that you can see, because that's inviting more sensory stuff going into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like I kind of like list making, where I'm like, list, an animal from each letter of the alphabet, or like a fruit or something like we're kind of all like familiar with, that I think, or if there's some kind of interest that they have, maybe I'm like, hey, tell me an instrument or a math term. I mean, I don't know, whatever that they're into. I like that ABC grounding, because I think they have to keep track of like the alphabet, right? So all that's very distracting. We can't both think about what all that she did wrong if we're trying to figure out what animal starts with the letter G, giraffe. But you get the idea. I like list making too, where I'll do, name all the planets in order from the sun, or I used to like to be like, name all the NBA teams in the East and the West, and like have like a list, and really trying to think through, or you do football teams or whatever.
Yep. Part of like the list, I use like a grounding worksheet that I go through with clients. Then it's a PDF, so I just send it to them. But we have like the mental grounding, then we have physical grounding, and then we have soothing grounding.
Yeah.
So in physical grounding, you're not just observing your environment, you're interacting with it. So it's a lot of touching different objects and comparing and contrasting. So I have like my fleece blanket that feels soft, that's warm. I have my desk, I can feel like the rigids of the wood, that's more room temp. I have my mouse, which is really smooth, it's a bit cooler. I have my cup, which is also really smooth. It's keeping everything pretty. I can see you touching everything.
Oh my God, that is quite smooth. Oh, that is room temperature.
Yes.
Touching everything.
This is a good one. Clients with like driving anxiety, or if they're driving and then they get anxious about something else in their life. This is a good one. There are usually a lot of textures. You have like the fabric of the seatbelt. You have the seats, which are either going to be like a cloth or a leather. Now a lot of the cars will have the gear shift like in the middle, so you can like touch that, and it has the ridges of the seam lines.
Yeah.
You have the steering wheel, you have the buttons for the windows and the locks, you have like the touch screens if you have a newer model.
And one hand at a time. Don't take both hands off the
Yeah,
wheel.
don't take both hands off the wheel. Yeah. But it's one where you can do in the car. I also do the mental grounding because there's usually a lot of things like look out the window or read the license plates, but go right to left because that's abnormal for your brain to do. For English readers, I guess maybe I should say we go left to right typically. So you go right to left, and that causes a little extra concentration and focus for your brain to do.
Ooh, even like road trip games. I'm thinking of like, hey, find a billboard with A on it, or like I like to look at people's license plate and try to make up funny acronyms from the letters in there. This is all like just fun in general activities while I'm driving. Driving's so boring.
And then our last one is soothing grounding. So for soothing, this one a lot of clients will use usually at night. I'll have them do for bedtime. This is still list for the most part, but I have them like list their favorite things. And so I'll have them close their eyes in session and I'll start with like bring to mind your favorite color and just imagine a room of all this color.
Nice.
And then it's like a swipe screen, right? So now we're going to swipe, and now I want you to imagine your favorite animal.
Oh.
And now we're going to swipe, imagine your favorite landscape. So for some clients, this is the mountains. For some clients, this is the beach. For some clients, it's just a park. And now we're going to swipe again. And I want you to picture the face of somebody you really love and care about.
Oh,
and we're going to swipe again. Imagine your favorite room and your favorite place. And then we pull in the mental grounding. I want you to just observe all of the colors you see in this room. Notice all of the textures. Notice all of the objects.
That's cool.
So when you're saying like different teams or different TV shows, if clients are really into a particular TV show, imagine your favorite episode. Play that for a little bit. I want you to hum your favorite song, and I'll give them a full 60 seconds. So we do the soothing. And then the one I forgot in physical grounding, and I do this with a lot of my clients, is progressive muscle relaxation, where you go through all of the different muscle groups, you purposefully tense them, and you purposely release them. This is one I really use with anger because we naturally, when we get excess anger, we become very tense.
Yeah. Are you like watching me flex? Probably I'm like doing it. I'm like following along, like doing this to my therapist of myself as you're talking.
Yep.
Yeah.
So an easy way to start this is purposely clench your fist, hold that. I have them hold it for about 30 seconds.
30? Oh, God.
Yep. And notice everything. Notice, for me, like how the nails feel in your palm. Notice your knuckles. Notice your forearms. Notice your upper arms. Notice the tension that moves up into your shoulders the longer you hold this. Notice all of that. And then I want you to take a big deep breath in. And as you exhale, release your fist. And you just notice what that feels like to open your hands and to release that tension.
My hands
yeah.
Squeezing the hell out of them.
So we'll do this with each muscle group. I usually start at the feet where we flex our feet. Then we do our calves and our thighs and our stomach. We'll do our hands. We'll make funny faces with our facial muscles. And then at the end, we flex everything in our body. We will hold that for about 30 seconds. Then we'll take a big deep breath and we'll exhale and we release every muscle in our body.
Wow. Maybe I think I've not loved that skill as a clinician because I get it's almost like preparing for exertion. Make it have to lift weights. So I'm like mentally like, I'll make it like amped up, but I think maybe I wasn't holding it long enough. I would just do it for like a second or two, but then I feel like you're just preparing to like engage. So it felt kind of like explosive almost, but I can see how like holding it longer because then you're noticing the relaxation more, I think.
Yeah.
You're paying attention for longer.
So I'll usually do about 5 to 10 seconds as we go through the different muscle groups. And then when we hold everything, I usually kind of push them through their window of tolerance and really make them hold that when I see they're kind of struggling. I'm like, we're going to take a big deep breath. And when you release, you're going to let go of all your tension. Like, exhale.
One of these days you're going to hear a big fart. Oh, can you imagine? That'd be so funny. I would laugh. Oh my God. No, it's probably never happened. That's good.
It might.
I guess like I've done which is kind of the same like a body scan.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Of like, so I guess I yeah, I lean away towards like the tension thing. I like how you did that. Where I'll say, hey, notice your socks on your feet. Notice the pressure of your feet in your shoes. Notice, how your socks feel on your ankles. How warm are your pants? You're kind of checking on like your clothes. And either
Mhm.
I have to start at feet and move up. Some people want head down, or I'll imagine myself slowly getting into like a hot tub. But I want the lights I want it to be like blue. Blue feels calming to me. So I imagine myself like slowly like dipping into like warm water. And that feels nice. I do it when I'm trying to go to sleep. I'll do
Mhm.
that one. Yeah. And so the grounding, I'm not gonna have a client do this when there's active conflict, because you're obviously not listening to somebody if you're making a list of the alphabetical items in your room. But I think that grounding can be really helpful for like those timeout
Mhm.
moments of getting out of that anger response. Is that how you're kind of
Yes.
prescriptive with it as well? Okay.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah, I wouldn't use that one, because that's just gonna make the person more angry, because then you're obviously really not listening to them.
Yeah.
You're trying to calm yourself down.
Yep. The thing is,
Mhm.
especially with like the muscle relaxation, the more you practice it, the more aware you are of your natural body states.
Of tension,
And
yeah.
you'll start to notice. So even now, sometimes I'll be like, oh, my shoulders are really clenched and they're up by my ears. And I was like, calm the fuck down. Like, you're going to get everything done. Lower your shoulders. And
Yeah.
just like lowering my shoulders gives this impression that it's going to be okay and I'm going to achieve everything. And if I don't, the world won't stop
Yeah.
spinning.
It's like literally unloading the weight of the world and just,
Yes.
oh,
Yes.
yeah.
But when you talk about not doing it in the moment, that's probably the one caveat. The more you become aware of your body state, the more you can counteract that in the moment. So if I notice my fists are becoming clenched in the midst of an argument, the more I practice progressive muscle relaxation, I'm going to notice that quicker. And I can be like, hold on, this is fine. We're just arguing about why I didn't take out the trash. And she's upset or he's upset. I didn't do my assigned chore.
Right. So you're noticing, okay, and then, it's like you can't panic without your heart racing. If your heart isn't racing, your brain cannot reach a frenzy of panic. It just doesn't work that way. So again, if like, yeah, really good point. If we're in the middle of an argument, if I'm able to like practice my breathing and regulate like my biometric components that are responding, I'm only going to get so mad. I'm only going to get so stressed. But it's like checking that body real time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the
Yeah.
emotion is still going to be there. The physical manifestation is what we're looking to regulate.
Yeah, because it's going to cap how intensely you're going to experience that emotion if your body's not able to follow you into your spiral.
Yes. Yep. So practice is really the key here. The more you do it in calm states, the more your brain is going to be able to notice that in heightened states.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Moving out of passivity, we talked about kind of regulating anger
Mm-hmm.
and some coping skills there. Moving out of passivity and regulating into assertiveness is going to be the boundary setting. So again, we referred you guys back to what's in a boundary, second episode in season 1. Basic framework of a boundary. One, we always want to make sure we're doing things that are within our control because we're managing how we respond to other people. We're not looking to control them. So it's if you, and then we insert a behavior. So I always use, if you put your feet on my dashboard, I will no longer give you rides.
I will drive this car off a cliff.
That's a bit extreme.
Yeah, okay.
So it's if you, and let them know like the undesired behavior, then I, how are you going to respond in the future to this behavior?
As opposed to if you, then you, that would be like threatening or controlling people, but you're just letting them know, if you do this, this is how I'm going to react, and just telling them what to expect.
Correct. Then if they do it again, they've had informed consent essentially, and you follow through. And if they're like, well, I didn't know. Yes, you did. I told you.
Yeah. I find lots of times when I am coaching a client on how to start setting boundaries, a lot of the times I say something like, oh, that's not going to go well. Or like, oh, she's not going to like that. Or, oh, she's going to freak out. Like they're really afraid of the other person kind of escalating the conflict.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, yeah, most people don't like to have limits applied. Doesn't mean you don't set them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
That's a good. That's a good way to put it. I usually respond to that with, yep, I bet they are going to have some uncomfortable emotions in response to that. And I bet that'd be a really good conversation for them and their therapist because you can't change your behavior to manage their emotions. That's for them to deal with.
Yeah. And they can follow. And sometimes when you set a boundary, you have to set more boundaries around the setting of the boundary.
Yeah.
Hey, if you continue to put your feet on my dashboard, I'm not going to be able to give you rides anymore. If they start, freaking out, you might have to say, hey, I've already set this boundary. This isn't something that I'm going to be discussing further. You might have to be setting up conversational boundaries, how much you're going to be willing. You're not going to, negotiate with those boundaries. And so there might be kind of a series that follows up where you're just kind of realigning that firmness, what you're letting them know what they can expect.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely some opportunities for boundaries in the post. I think one is just saying no. No can be a boundary.
Yep.
Can I borrow a pencil? No. Why? I've lent you a pencil every day this week. It's Friday. You should have gotten a pencil by now. So no. Hey, I didn't bring my book. Okay. Can I have yours? No. Why? Dude, it's March. You've been in this class for 3 months. It's at the same time every day. You know you need your book. I don't know why you didn't bring it, but I'm not going to struggle trying to share my book and take longer to do my work because you didn't want to carry the extra weight in your book bag.
Yeah. I'd say sometimes, especially for kind of nervous clients, I'll have them say something like, I'm not going to be able to help you with that anymore. Like, hey, I know I used to help you, but I'm not going to be able to do that for you anymore, which is difficult. Feels good to be wanted.
Feels better to be respected.
Oh, snap. Put that shit on a t-shirt.
Right. When somebody will show up in your life and respect you, simply for you, that relationship dynamic feels very different than feeling like you have to make yourself smaller. You have to be of use to them for them to show up in the relationship.
And that indicates that, like, if somebody doesn't respect your boundaries, they're basically saying, I'm in this relationship to take. I'm not here to give or to really care about what you're wanting. I'm here to get my needs met.
Yep.
She's basically saying, I'm justified in taking advantage of you, and here's why, and listing out all these reasons. And the person's kind of buying into it. And if one or two times she's like, oh my God, I really tweaked my back in practice, or like, I did this new thing and I am so sore. If it's one-offs, okay, that there's time and place for that. But when somebody's just further solidifying the reason that they have to take advantage of you, that is not somebody you want to really continue to be vulnerable with.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we even talked about this where there are times in a relationship where somebody is going to have to give more than they can take.
Yep.
If your relationship is starting off that way, something's probably wrong, and that's probably setting the tone for what you can expect. But it's normal. Life is going to happen. Somebody may not be able to give as much at times, but that should be temporary and circumstantial. It should not be the given or the norm.
Yeah.
We gave our Am I the Asshole verdict in Tuesday's episode. We deemed she was the asshole. The friend is also engaging in some asshole behavior. Her very last line is, am I the asshole? And if I am, what should I do to save our relationship? So I'm curious what your thoughts are for her saving the friendship. Yeah.
My impressions of this, if this were my client, I would talk about romanticized self versus actual self. So I'd say basically, one, what is the archetype of friendship that we're referring to? Because I'm not sure that would fit into how I would traditionally view a friend. But then I'd also kind of say I don't think this is what you think this is. I think this is the idea of somebody, but this person is not in actuality probably going to provide what you're needing. They've not given you any indication that they respect you. And it's very transactional. So are you really viewing this person realistically and having realistic expectations for the capacity of this friendship? And I also think that this really reflects a lot of low self-esteem would be my main thing of why are we so eager to come get punched in the face again? What was your thoughts of her statement there?
I am right in line with you. I would be having conversations of like our definition of friendship. What are we getting out of this friendship, so to speak? what is our desire to save the friendship?
Mm-hmm.
I would also, this is probably the time where I would point out some of the inconsistency. So in her very first line, she's saying, my friend is a pretty toxic person. But then her like second to last line is, she's a decent friend and the only one who lives close to me.
I think she feels like it's either this or I'm alone.
Yeah. So like, do we want to feel terrible from all of these interactions where we feel taken advantage of? Or do we want to step back and maybe there is a period of aloneness, but we're at least free to engage in a new friendship that is maybe going to meet some of our needs? This dynamic plays out a lot in romantic relationships as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is even I have some like, kind of high controlling, high criticizing clients, and it's like, well, if I don't control them, then they're just not going to be what I want. It's like, well, then they're probably not what you want, because when you're letting them operate in their natural state without being manipulated by you, they aren't meeting your expectations. So
Mm-hmm.
you're continuing to kind of like beat them over the head with nagging, basically to try to like modify change. That's not really who that person is.
Yeah.
So it's like you got to be realistic of that person and who they
Yeah.
are.
Mm-hmm.
And if at the end of the dissection, the author determined that there was value to the friendship, I basically would coach them of, in order to save it, for you to be well, you need to implement boundaries. And then how she responds to those would be a good data point of
Yep.
capacity for this going forward. So I wouldn't focus on saving the relationship. I would focus on the friendship. I would focus on helping that person be more assertive, and then letting that person's reaction to that determine the longevity of that.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that 100%.
Will you want to summarize for us?
Sure.
Sure do.
Is this
Yeah.
like the dreaded task of like, God, who's going to have to summarize this?
I think for listeners, we're not like, we have like a loose element. We're not like taking notes. So then it's basically like, hey, a quiz. Tell me everything we just talked about. Kind of quiz each other. You're like, oh shit, I've been paying attention this whole time.
That's exactly what it is.
It's like the ultimate reflective listening.
Pop quiz. Okay.
Pop quiz.
We first talked about regulating our imbalanced states of passivity and aggressiveness. We talked about the self first. So for aggressiveness or heightened anger, a good one to use are 3 Bs: breathe, back up, be quiet. You could also use some grounding techniques if your state of mind still has some loose connections to your logic brain that you can do, and that will help you de-escalate. For our passive folks, we really just need to use our voice. So this is going to look most likely boundary settings or communicating how somebody's actions made us feel. So our I statements. So for our passive folks, pull up your communication skills. And that's what you're going to need to rebalance into being assertive. For helping somebody else, if you happen, we didn't necessarily talk about this, but if you happen to have maybe a passive friend who you know kind of stuff, maybe just encourage them like, hey, this is a safe space. I'm not going to judge you. I'd really like to know how you felt. So maybe encourage them to share. When they do share, do your best not to meet that with defensiveness.
Yeah.
On the flip side, de-escalating somebody who has excess anger. This could be helping them to ground. So asking them these questions. Hey, can you name everything you see in this room? This could be pointing out behavioral observations. I can see your pacing. I can see your fists are clenched. I can see the vein in your forehead is bulging. It seems like something's really bothering you, or I get the impression you're angry. Is that correct? Our validation skills, which we went over in season 1, of it's understandable why you would feel XYZ because ABC. That lets them know that they are being heard, which again is that function of anger. So we're meeting that functional need and allows them to re-regulate. If we're not fully in one of the polar ends and we're maybe in one of those intermediary spaces, just saying like, what am I needing to communicate when we're feeling anger is always a good option. Identify that need to speak up and then do so.
Amen.
So Yeah, we did a lot of throwbacks to season 1. I'll recap those real quick. We had our communication styles, which is season 1, episode 1. We had boundary setting, season 1, episode 2. We have quite a few on like rigid versus assertive, loose versus assertive, and assertive. Like being assertive, I think is the title of it, where we go in depth on each of the different types of boundaries. So we have rigid boundaries, loose boundary, assertive boundaries that we didn't necessarily touch on for this one. There's an episode on fair fighting for conflict resolution within relationships. This is where we talk more in depth about the timeouts, emotion versus logic. We talk more about how to re-regulate when we get into one of those primal escalated states, and how do we kind of balance our emotions and our logic so one is not leading the charge. Compromise versus people pleasing, we talk more about passivity there and how do we differentiate between we're being passive versus we're being cooperative. So
yes.
So for our faithful listeners, you guys have heard all of this before. For some of our new folks who are maybe just joining us in season 2, there are a lot of good nuggets in season 1. You can go back and choose what's relevant or interesting to you. Add-ons to that?
Yeah, dealing with anger does not mean that you don't feel angry anymore. It means that you've had conversations about something.
Yes.
So that's both for a passive and an aggressive person. The goal is just to be like, oh, I'm over it now. Like only feel over it if you've communicated it with somebody. It has to be externalized.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah. All righty. That's what we have for you guys on this one. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts. You can reach us on Instagram at Assertive Podcast or send them via email, assertivepodcast@gmail.com. Until next time.